The following video sounds like a cock and bull story, but it actually isn't. If you're not aware of I do subjects on this channel of trying to figure out what the hell went wrong when people come up with standards a lot. Water pipe standards, lamps, copper tubing standards. Don't go there. Anything. Pro tip, the only thing consistent when it comes to firearms that you can actually rely on is the one part they won't tell you about. If something says it's a .22 caliber rifle, the only thing consistent between two of them that are marked identically for a standard isn't going to be the damn bullet. It's going to be the chamber for the cartridge. And it's the only thing you don't know the number of. Unless it's .22 long rifle, you have no idea what the diameter for that chamber is. You just don't. If it's .22 Magnum, you're totally wrong, unless you look it up. If it's 5.56, 5.56 millimeter, which is equivalent to 22.3 caliber or .223 caliber, that cartridge in that rifle, the centerfire one, the loud one, only one of the parts in there might be .22 anything. And as for the chamber and the cartridge, maybe the neck of it comes close. The rest of it will be different diameters, usually larger, and there'll be several of them. But what they designate it by is the bullet that comes out and how long the cartridge is. Doesn't matter if the cartridge is shaped in a funnel shape, has wiggle waggles, doesn't matter. And this is such a problem that the standards organizations just tell you, look up the dimensions chart on a diagram. Okay, now let's get to the fun of marketing. The following story deals with the differences between measurement systems. Now, this can be measured as a certain number of milliliters. So it's based on liters, which is volume only. It can be based on dimensions, like how far across it is in here. That would be in meters and millimeters and centimeters. They can't be confused. And it could also be based on the mass of material, which would be in grams or kilograms. Right? Simple. Because the word gram, meter, and liter don't sound the same. Or we can measure it in pounds, ounces, or ounces and gallons, or cups, or pints. See how things go off the rails. Now, we round things off because that won't cause problems. And then, on top of this, because someone felt like it, I don't know if you know this, but there's two versions of the pound that are commonly used even today, because they're based on ounces. There's ounces, and then there's troy ounces. So we have liters, pounds, and troy pounds as well. Yes, because there's a troy pound. When shotguns are designed and sold, they get a designation that refers to the cartridge diameter, but it's based on the bore diameter that's approximate, that you don't have to use at all in the shotgun, based on the following idea. A 12 gauge is supposed to have a barrel that's maximum diameter will let you get away with firing a 1/12 of a pound lead ball that's perfectly round out of it. Pure lead. If it has any contamination that's lightweight metals, it'll be larger diameter. So it's based on that idea. That's the standard for it. If it says it's a 16 gauge, that means it can fire a 1 ounce lead ball that's perfectly round. The idea is that the barrel could be a little bit larger and it could roll through because it can roll. Normal bullets are longer than they are fat. This is a round ball gun, so it has to be able to do that. Normally you fire pellets that are smaller than that. So its bore diameter can really change a lot. So the only thing that's really stable is that shotgun shell is supposed to be in a 12 gauge at the base, 0.809 inches in diameter, or 0.81. A little bit of slop factor in the chamber is better, but the cartridge can't be bigger. The cartridge could be smaller than it's supposed to be, but only a little bit. And the chamber could be a little bit bigger than it's supposed to be. And then towards the end, where the business end, it can get skinnier by a factor of, a whole caliber change. The bore diameter is ostensibly 73 or 72 caliber, but that's not really the designation, even though that's exactly what the 1/12 of a pound ball is. And in a 16 gauge, it has to fire a 1 ounce ball, and it's got a certain bore diameter as well. And on top of that, you could designate these by millimeter rating. We try to avoid that. Depending on the cartridge and gun you're dealing with, it will almost always refer to a millimeter rating or a caliber, or it might have 2 dimensions to indicate how long the cartridge is. Like, you can have a 12 gauge cartridge that's 2 inches, and in Europe it's called a 1250 because 50 millimeters is close to 2 inches. That's literally a designation. I'm not making that up. The point is that none of this makes any sense, and you get used to it after a while. But the only thing that's standard in a 12 gauge is that it refers to you having to look up the dimensions for that cartridge. Now let's do the 410 shotgun. 410 shotgun is weird because 410 does not refer to its gauge. It does not shoot 1/410th of a pound of lead in a round pellet. By the way, if you're pro tip, 410 gauge, if you actually made one, is approximately a 22.5 caliber. Yeah, dead ass, it's almost exactly the same size as a 223, 224, 225 kind of cartridge would fire. I'm not kidding. There's even a bullet that used that, and on the side, if they sold it to you as a shotgun, smoothbore, long barrel, it would fire a 22 caliber cartridge. It was a center fire because just make it weird. And it literally said on the side, this is a 410 spelled out in full letters. 410 shotgun, otherwise known as a 22.5 caliber. It's almost exactly 22.5. Just because it was funny. It's called a Velo Dog. So anyway, let's get on with the 410 shotgun. At one point, someone noticed, probably somebody who was used to loading from the muzzle end, that the best way to figure out the bore diameter, the real one you'd end up with out of a gun, was to figure out the bore diameter at the muzzle. That's the end where things come out. That's usually the smallest end in a shotgun. Okay, we'll measure that. I'll make a round ball that size, measure it, and figure out how many of those per pound, and that'll give me a number, and I can call it a gauge. Because a 0.410 bore diameter should have that number. But what if you made a mistake and only had the barrel and you're French? And this is a brand new gun from the 1880s. Never seen it before. You pick up the barrel and realize you can't figure out which end is which because it's a straight barrel, meaning a barrel blank looking thing. It's an extremely simplified gun to where it doesn't really show you which end is the cartridge end. In fact, maybe you've spent your entire time learning about muzzle loaders and figured it was just a dismantled barrel. Oh well, either end will work, and then you measure the end with the chamber for the cartridge, which is almost always bigger than whatever shoots out of it. And you measure it, and it comes out very nearly. We're going to round off now. Round off number 1. Round 1. It's 12 millimeters. That's not 0.41 inches. That's not 41 caliber, which is what a 410 shotgun is. No. That's about 47 caliber almost. So you convert it to about 47 caliber. But you know you're rounding off because you go from millimeters to fractions of an inch. And you could just measure it with an inch measurement. But no. Let's be a European and use millimeters somehow. So we end up rounding up numbers or rounding them down. It's a range of numbers. We'll pick something. Now, how do we designate things? Well, there's a formula for figuring out, you figure out your diameter, and it tells you how many round balls that size would fit into a pound. And then you round it down or round it up depending on marketing reasons. But the equations you're using aren't for the normal avoirdupois or avoirdupois, depending on pronunciation, pound like they use in the United States and England. This one is, as you can tell, a French designation. That's for the normal one we use, by the way. That's for the normal pound. No, you're not using that one. You're going to use troy ounces and troy pounds because reasons. A troy pound made from troy ounces you may have heard of, is a lot like a normal pound with normal ounces. A troy pound is 0.8229% of a normal pound. So let's list here. We've rounded off by going millimeter to caliber, one round off, and one transition. Each transition has a round off. Then we're going to convert that into fractions of a pound, but we've already decided to use troy pounds. That's wrong by being 82% of what a normal pound is. Then we round off again, and we end up with the number 36 gauge. If you're not aware of it, a 41 caliber ball is approximately 67 or 68 gauge. This is almost a factor of 2 to 1 wrong because, number one, we didn't measure from the muzzle end, which is usually not a good idea. It's not the best idea, but it's closer. No, we measured from the chamber end, which is always bigger. Then we measured it in millimeters instead of inches, converted it to fractions of an inch, then used that to convert it to fractions of a pound, but used the wrong type of pound, so we're off by a factor of 20%. The wrong way. So, instead of coming up with 67 or 68 gauge, we've come up with almost exactly half at 36 gauge. So what do we put on the box? 410, 12 millimeter, 36 gauge, and for the fun of it, because the length of the cartridge is 2 inches to 3 inches, we put on 3 inches. This is the kind of shit that makes Mars rovers hit Jupiter. This is how you screw things up. This is rounding off 1, 2 times, going from metric to imperial to troy rather than imperial pounding, and then deriving a fraction, rounding down or rounding up. So what actually does this, the actual numbers in math? Okay, in poundage for the gauge for that bore diameter at 12 millimeter, if I actually do the math correctly, you end up with it being a 43.74 gauge. And that works out to a 47.417 caliber instead of 47.1. We've jacked it up almost a half caliber wrong. So we started off not measuring the muzzle end. We measured the breech end thinking it was the muzzle, made something that won't even jam into it anymore after going from 12 millimeter to inches, and then converting it to gauge using the wrong version of a pound because we're French. I'm not making any of this up. That's literally what happened. Anyway, this is not done anymore, and this is the reason it's called a 410 bore shotgun. Not the least of which calling it a 68 gauge or 67 gauge seems weird, I guess. Actually, it doesn't sound any weirder than the others. It's because there were so many designations that didn't make any sense. The only thing anybody wanted to stick with was the bore diameter, which is what you do with a shotgun anyway, even though shotguns don't ever have to be the bore that they say they are. And that is how the 410 shotgun got to be the only gun designated on being really a caliber 41, when it absolutely, every one of you find, will never be 41 caliber. And the only thing stable about it, which is that it used an approximately 12-inch chamber, or 0.47 inches, which also isn't correct because it's rounding error, almost ended up being the real designation for it. It's the only part of the gun that's actually going to have to match all the time, so the cartridges all fit. That's it. So that is the story how you ended up with the 36 gauge being around. And you will find people using that number, even though 36 gauge is almost exactly 50.6 caliber. And you will see people insisting that we should call it that because they saw it on the box, even though this is caused by an error between France, England, and metric, imperial, and troy imperial poundage. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. I hope this was entertaining. I don't think it could possibly be informative in any way. God help us all. Goodbye.